千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. As always, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Chapter 76 is known as the soft and pliant chapter. The chapter title is about the soft and pliant. The focus is on the principle of softness, 柔, and it provides a different perspective from what we typically think of when it comes to softness. The Western perception of softness is equating that to weakness. In the Tao, the appearance of softness is not the whole story. Underneath that appearance is power and strength. Indeed, it is the truly strong that can be gentle. So, this is what the chapter looks like. Relatively short chapter of 13 lines. So previously, we went through a sectional analysis. We identified 3 distinct sections in this chapter. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. So the beginning, the introductory part of the chapter, starts out talking about the softness of the body while the body is alive, and conversely, that it's hard when dead. And this applies to all living things. While alive, grass and trees are supple, are soft, but when dead, they become dry and brittle. So that's the opening. That's the beginning of this chapter. And this is observation about nature that applies to a Tao principle. So the middle part is expressing that principle. It's talking about how hardness, stiffness, these are characteristics of death, and therefore Lao Tzu calls that the follower of death. Conversely, the soft, the yielding, those are characteristics of being alive. So Lao Tzu calls that the follower of life. So what Lao Tzu is telling us is that we, in our daily lives, as we go about our business, we need to adopt the softness. We need to be gentle. We need to approach in that flexible fashion, ability to change, to yield, to let other people go first, to let them win an argument. Whereas what people often do, being inflexible, dogmatic, the quote-unquote hard ass, those are not the best ways to live one's life. Those are signs of death manifesting in that person, and therefore we don't want to be the follower of death, we want to be the follower of life. The conclusion, the last section there, is talking about, it concludes with the statement that the big and forceful occupy a lowly position, while the soft and pliant occupy a higher place, the higher, better, superior position. And before that, it talks about using an army as an example. The flexible army wins, inflexible army loses. And a tree that is not flexible makes great timber, so it's cut down. And we talked about the tree being uprooted in a storm, in a hurricane. So these are all different ways to validate the point that Lao Tzu is trying to make, that we can all incorporate softness into our lives. And I attempted to summarize everything that Lao Tzu talked about with this particular graph. The soft, as you can see, occupies the higher position, while the hard occupies the lower position. So on top, the soft is aligned with life. In the examples used by Lao Tzu, first talks about humans, where our bodies are flexible and soft while alive. And this flexibility and softness can be further extended not just to the physical body, but also to the mind. And we have also seen that it can apply to spirituality as well. Further, Lao Tzu extended the softness to cover living things. Plants are soft and supple while growing, brittle when dead. These have to do with the Tao of Wu Wei, which is tied to the principle of softness. Lao Tzu is suggesting that this is the way to live. And as counterexample, the hard approach aligned with death, shown in the human body upon death becoming stiff and inflexible, also manifests in dried branches that we can see in the forest. These are dead things. They become dry and brittle. They're easy to break. As opposed to the Tao of Wu Wei, this is the desiring state. It's associated, aligned with death. The more we pursue desires, the more we tend to be hard and inflexible. Obsession, attachment are not flexible. They are insistent. So Lao Tzu would say, this is the wrong way to live. This is the wrong path to take. And as further illustration, we talked about using trees in a storm as an example. If you are able to bend with the wind, remain flexible, you can easily survive. The trees can survive the hurricane. And if we have that same flexibility, we can survive misfortunes in life, which are like the storms or hurricanes that occur in one's life. On the other hand, refusing to yield, in our westernized culture, we oftentimes think of that as being a good thing, to be strong, to be tough. But the inflexibility, as Lao Tzu points out, is actually something that works against us. So when facing the winds of change, being inflexible, you end up not doing so well. The tree is uprooted or snapped, and change is happening all the time. So the winds of change are blowing all the time, and sometimes it can be a storm or hurricane of change. We definitely see that happening in our world with so many things changing before our eyes. The last few years are a great example of that. But pretty much at any time in history, and in the days ahead of us, there's going to be more changes because there's been a lot of changes. No reason to expect that will be different anytime soon. In the Tao tradition, there's a couple of examples that are often used when a Tao master is teaching about softness. Water is a favorite example in the Tao tradition. Oftentimes, one of the foremost examples being used about water being the softest things in the world, and yet it can defeat the hardest things, the stones, the rocks. Water can draw through rocks, water can wear away stones, and oftentimes, as I said, the foremost example to illustrate the soft overcomes. Then, yet another example that is probably the oldest example in the Tao tradition, and that's the comparison between the tongue and the teeth. The tongue is soft, so it lasts. Whatever lasts is in accordance with the Tao. The teeth are hard, but they cannot last. When you get old, they fall out. So this is oftentimes talked about in the Tao tradition, and it goes back almost to the time of Lao Tzu. The soft eventually wins. It wins in the long run. And then previously, I also talked about this particular senior Tao master whom I admired and regarded as one of the 2 living sages in the world. This particular senior master taught the principle of softness and was very complete, in my opinion, in talking about how we should apply the principle to our lives. So I wanted to bring up that slide once again in the recap because I think it is such great wisdom that has benefited me tremendously. I have endeavored to follow everything that he talked about. He spoke of how the Tao cultivator should have a modest demeanor, should be friendly, helpful, and positive. That's what I try to do. That the tricky part that he talked about is that oftentimes people, ourselves included, we become self-righteous when we have the facts on our side. So in an argument, we can get louder, we can be pounding the table and stressing how right we are while being so incredibly righteous. So this senior Tao master emphasized that that is exactly the time that you want to be harmonious instead of self-righteous, that you want to have the facts on your side, you want to make sure that you understand the facts, but then you don't want to use that to beat other people into submission. And that is something that I have definitely taken to heart. And then the Tao master spoke of gentle courtesy, that it is something that will win you far more respect than abrasive rudeness. Makes a lot of sense when he says it like that. And yet, there are times when we forget and then we become abrasive and rude, forgetting this particular wisdom. And then he also spoke of true strength. It's honor and excellence. It is not aggression. The world seems to look to aggression as a sign of strength. In the Tao, we look to that sense of honor, that excellence in doing one's work. That is the real strength. Lastly, the master spoke of taking a low profile, far more useful. And he actually did expand on this greatly. He talked about, well, what does it mean to take a low profile? He talked about taking a low profile in attitude, in conduct, and in communication, all very different areas of life. Attitude, you may be projecting, showing your attitude even without doing anything or speaking a word. So the attitude that he taught, and I try to follow, is to always assume that I have a lot more to learn. Never assume that I know it all. And then also to expect more from myself than I expect from other people. Then what about low profile in conduct? Well, the master talked about not being arrogant, to not flaunt yourself, to not advertise yourself. And this is certainly good advice. This is something that I also had to learn. I used to show off. I think, decades ago, that was the person that I was, but this is something that I had to change in myself as well. Lastly, in communication, to take a low profile means to be soft-spoken. And we ourselves know that it can be so annoying when someone in the same physical space that we happen to be is loud or rude, perhaps yelling at other people. We find that very annoying. So by extension, we want to watch for that same behavior in ourselves. If there's a misunderstanding in communication, it is not cause for consternation, but an opportunity that perhaps I was not clear. I should practice on bettering my communication so that I can convey my points with clarity. In other words, this is a tricky point as well. Most of the time, we tend to blame other people. Oh, they didn't hear me correctly. What the master said is flip that around. Assume that you did not say it correctly and figure out a way to say it better. So these are the recaps from our previous talk. It's been a few weeks, so I want to go over them again. And now we're ready to finish up chapter 76, starting with the paraphrase, as we always do. And as I remarked before, the paraphrase is different from the translation. The paraphrase is us literally paraphrasing the original using modern language to illustrate meaning and to demonstrate understanding. So 76 starts out with that first section, which compares the human body and living things like grass and trees. So how can we paraphrase that? Here's what I will offer. The Tao emphasis on the soft is based on observations of nature. Sages note that while people are alive, their bodies are supple and flexible. When they are dead, their bodies become stiff and unyielding. It's the same with all living things. Whether animal or plants, they possess softness while alive and become brittle in death. Then this section following is to talk about the follower of death and the follower of life, extending from the examples in the intro. Here's the paraphrase for that. When we apply this to our world, we can see that a dogmatic mindset, incapable of change, is aligned with death. On the other hand, an adaptive mindset that responds to changing conditions is the soft approach that is aligned with life. There is no question which one will be more preferable. So, characteristic of being alive is reacting to the environment. So, as the environment is changing, we change as well. To not be able to change, it means that you may technically be alive, but you are already headed for extinction. We definitely see that to be true in these changing times. Lastly, the concluding section talks about, eventually ends up with the big and forceful being lowly and the soft and pliant in a higher place. So that's the conclusion that we want to make sure we depict in the paraphrase. Here's the paraphrase for that. In this perspective, a powerful military force may be at a disadvantage if it cannot change its approach quickly. A tree that grows strong may be cut down to be used as timber. In both scenarios, as it is in life, the softer way is superior, and being flexible is of the paramount importance. So hopefully that conveys what Lao Tzu was trying to express, trying to teach, wanting us to learn. So the very last thing we do is to tie up the end of the chapter to the beginning. In the very end of 76, Lao Tzu talks about the soft occupying a higher position. Let's keep that in mind. And then link it back to the first line, to the beginning, which talks about human beings while alive are soft. So linking it back top to bottom gives us the insight that Lao Tzu is basically saying life and death, while they are both part of the Tao, life has greater value to us because it is the condition of possibilities. It is where there's still time, there's still possibilities to make things happen, to do different things with our lives. So life is better than death. Being alive is better than being dead. Being dead cuts off all possibilities. No longer any chance to make any course corrections, whatever regrets you may be feeling. So being alive is far better. So the principle of softness is aligned with life. And that is why the principle of softness is better than being hard, stiff, and inflexible. The soft approach is the path that we should all follow. And I end with the very last line reiterated. Let's all remember, the soft and pliant occupy a higher place. We should all be taking that to heart. We should all become more soft and pliant in our daily lives. This ends our discussion of chapter 76. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.